Hey gang, it is December 7th today. I am in the Detroit area, actually in Bloomfield Hills, at a cemetery called Pine Lake. It's an old, small cemetery on the side of a hill here. And we're actually here to talk about Charles Lindbergh. Now, he's not buried here, but his mother is. Now, Charles is buried in Hawaii, and I'm not going to be going out there anytime soon, but I really wanted to tell you an update about Charles Lindbergh that is shocking. I mean, his life is already a shocking story, and as some of you may know, a lot of bad things. Creepy kind of guy. Well, that's my opinion. Anyway, it gets a lot creepier with this book that came out. Lise Pearlman is her name, and this book came out in 2020, I believe, with a theory that he possibly may have done, in addition to a lot of the bad things he represented and did, and we'll talk a little bit about it, but this kind of adds on the list in a big way, and it is related to his little boy, Charles Jr., who was kidnapped and murdered. Crime of the century. So let's take a walk and talk about this story, and we'll talk a little bit about Charles Lindbergh. We'll look at some stones, and I'll tell you about some of the stuff that came out in this book. I can tell you it is a book I would definitely recommend. For those who don't know, at the age of 25, he went from obscurity as a U.S. mail pilot to instant world fame by making the first non-stop flight from New York City to Paris. That was on May 20, I think he arrived on the 21st in 1927. And he became a superstar, parades and all that stuff. They called him Lucky Lindy. But this guy was a strange dude. Very antisocial. Like I said, he was kind of a creep. He used to play pranks on people, his friends, but not just pranks, really dark kind of things. I'll give you an example. His roommate, and I think it was in the service, would never fill the water pitcher before they went to bed or whatever. So what did he do? He fills the pitcher with gasoline. So the guy comes in and he's like, oh yeah, it's full. And he like swallows a huge, goes down into convulsions. I don't even think Charles Lindbergh was helping him. The guy almost died. Now that's just one story. And wait till you hear some of the stuff I'm gonna tell you about this guy. Stuff that you probably didn't know unless you're a Charles Lindbergh expert. So I'm going to skip ahead. You know, the big hero has his first son, a really cute little guy, Charles Jr., but the boy had some physical problems. He suffered from rickets. And by the way, I'm going to speak up really loud here because we're right by the road, Middle Belt Road. And rickets is a disease where, you know, there's a lack of vitamin D, and thus you have imperfect calcification of your bones, softening, distortion of the bones, typically have bowed legs and other issues. He was a very pale, white-skinned boy. His skin was dry. His toes were curled in. He couldn't stand up straight. He had an oversized head. The doctor called him a square head. And other issues, a lot of oddities. He was also bigger for his age. I think when he was kidnapped, he was almost 3. Looked like he was 4 or 5. And you have to wonder, with some of the things I'm going to tell you, if Charles Lindbergh just did not accept his son. Because, you know, the Lindbergh name. You know, we're going to get into eugenics. He was a big Hitler supporter, and he believed in eugenics, and he thought the Lindbergh name, his genes, his sperm was perfect, like the Aryan race. And the reason I say that is, as we get into this perspective that this author has brought up, it's going to come into play. Now, little Charlie Jr., his mom Ann, she loved him unconditionally. And she treated him with much care and attention. But soon after he was born, the father would pull the mother away. For example, let's go get some super intense flying lessons. Let's leave for 2 months. Or they'd be gone all day. And of course they had a nanny for the little guy. And they would never see him. Because Charles Lindbergh was always, he didn't even want to see him. In fact, they went to China for 2.5 months. China and Japan. When they came back, the little guy didn't even recognize them. Can you imagine his parents? Now, Anne was driven by Charles Lindbergh. He was a complete control freak. He was like a dictator. He was like a sergeant. He would make lists and give orders, and the family had to obey. The kids he had later, it was even worse. He'd have the little guy put to bed on a rigid schedule, and the nannies would have to have him sleeping or at least in bed before he even got home. Could you imagine? You got a little son and you don't even see him. Will Rogers, by the way, his wife, would come to visit. They were very close. Will Rogers was in awe of Charles Lindbergh. He was a hero. And he would write in his column, he wrote once that, and he thought it was funny. He said, the little boy would be playing with blocks on one side of the room with his mother, and sometimes the little guy would get up to walk across the room, and his father, Charles, would reach over real quick and grab one of the couch pillows, and he'd whip it at him and knock him down. He'd do that over and over. It was like a carnival game. So he said that it was kind of cute, quote unquote, that after 3 or 4 times, the little guy would just sit down on his little rump before the pillow came flying. Could you imagine? The guy had rickets. The father knew that. Fragile bones. Pretty sickening. A pretty sad father-son relationship, if you ask me. Warped. So I'm not going to get too much into it, but the boy was, the boy was kidnapped. And Charles Lindbergh, I got to tell you, without getting too much into the crime, there's tons of detail. The ladder that went up to the window to steal the boy. It is said that there were witnesses that saw Charles Lindbergh in his 1929 Dodge. I think it was the night before, in his car with the ladder and the passenger seat sticking out, assembled in pieces the night before. A ladder, Charles Lindbergh. They were pretty sure it was him. And there was a lock on the window of ultimately where the supposed kidnapper came in that Charles Lindbergh purposely, probably from all the evidence, would not let people fix. And after the kidnapping, when they discovered that the boy was gone, they came running in the room, and the mother and the nanny were first, of course, and then they went running out. Charles Lindbergh comes in, and then in plain sight, he finds this ransom note with no fingerprints on it. You have to read the book. I'm not going to get into it all, but the bottom line is, the whole theory is that Charles Lindbergh is the one who killed his child. And when you read this book, there's a lot of evidence. It's compelling. I'm not going to give it all away. But that guy was a creep. Now, he really blew it. He went from world hero, World War II came, and he was the pessimist. He was pro-Nazi. He was there before the war started. just in awe of Hitler and all those Nazis in their uniforms. And then when the war started and England was getting bombed, he was like, oh, he was anti-Roosevelt. Like he had thought he had so much power. He was making speeches like to give up and let England go down, pro-Nazi. And the big one, he literally came out. The turning point really was when he really revealed how much of an anti-Semite he was against the Jews. You know, the Jews are responsible. He basically played the whole Nazi propaganda of the Jews have a disproportionate share of real estate and movies and this and that, and it's not fair, and this and that and the other, and you get it all. He was so on the wrong side of the equation, but he went all in with it, and he went to become one of the most hated people in the world. Now look at this. I'm told I had talked to the sexton, Mary, or she's an administrator in charge of the cemetery. She said this is the grave of a very famous sculptor, I think, from here. And I don't see, there's no inscriptions, but maybe we can figure it out. But anyway, I got to give her kudos. I could not find the graves, but here they are, hidden by this bush. So I believe this is her brother, Charles Henry Land Jr. And the reason they're buried here is because they had a summer home here, I guess. And this is where they lived. So this says, Charles Henry Land Jr., son of Charles H. Land and Evangeline Lodge. He was born in Detroit, Michigan, 1879. And he died in Switzerland in 1961. So you have to imagine, is this a cenotaph or did they bring him back? Don't know. There's an interesting little pipe here. Maybe that's for flowers or something, but this is Evangeline's grave right here. Now, she was very much loved in this area. And let's just read her tombstone before I finish the story. It's a very nice stone, and it's probably good that it's laying down. There's a number of them here. You can tell they really care for everybody at the cemetery. It's a beautiful stone. So, wife of Charles Lindbergh, that's Charles Lindbergh's father, daughter of Charles Land of Evangeline Lodge, mother of Charles A. Lindbergh Jr., and born Detroit, Michigan, and she died in 1954. So, she lived a long time. So getting back to Charles Lindbergh, this woman's son, he, in my opinion, was the biggest creep on the planet. An arrogant Nazi racist, a proponent of eugenics, maybe even a traitor, maybe a child killer, maybe his child. It doesn't seem so far-fetched when you read this book. Now, this is a man who was well ahead of his time, and I have to tell you, when he died, there's a whole nother story, and some of you guys probably know this, but he philandered on his wife. He had 5 families in Germany. He would disappear for months every year. He would go to Germany, Munich, and there were these sisters, and it was all a secret, and they all kept it a secret, and he had many children. He had, I think, 5 families in secret, and this has now been proven, I guess, by DNA. A lot of you guys probably know this, but I mean, you add it all up, and this guy was the creep of creeps. I'm an aviator. I should be, it was a great feat he did, but if you're not if you're not a good person. Charles Lindbergh lived out his last days in Hawaii, and he kind of flipped on all his bad traits, and he became an environmentalist, and he was buried like as close as in those days to a natural burial. He was buried in white cloth, no zippers, no buttons. They put him in a local wooden casket, and no shoes, and he wanted to, you know, be part of the earth. So just some interesting facts, but go get this book and read it. It's interesting. You put all the pieces together and you go, yeah, you know what, maybe this guy did that. Maybe he's the one who murdered his son. Maybe not. I mean, I'm 50-50 on it, but it definitely opens the doors. So anyway, we're here to pay respects to Evangeline, and with that, we will conclude our episode today. Rest in peace, Evangeline Lindbergh. Rest in peace.